For the past few weeks, people have been asking me if I'm going to do a take on The Acolyte. And I don't have Disney Plus, and I don't watch a lot of that modern Star Wars. I will be doing a video soon called Rogue One, a love-hate relationship, where I will be roping Andor into that discussion, which I bought on 4K release because Disney actually had the intelligence to put that show out on physical media so I could watch it. But in the case of The Acolyte, I had no interest. It was like Ahsoka. I wasn't really going to sit down and watch that show, and I certainly wasn't going to get a Disney Plus account to take the time to view it. And in the background, we were hearing all the interviews where the brass at Lucasfilm was doing their preemptive damage control, saying, if you don't like the concept for this show and you watch it and don't like it, then you hate X, Y, and Z about society, or you're this kind of bad person, which... bad look. Like, it's really bad optics. But again, Kathleen Kennedy is more obvious in her screenwriting and her story preferences. Like, she's more obvious in a story than, I don't know, a pizza delivery guy in a porn movie. Like, her lack of subtlety is through the roof. Like, her lack of subtlety stat is beyond maxed out. And so when people were reporting in on social media talking about how bad the screenwriting was and how the characters were overly telegraphed and the story was losing itself in talking about characters' sexual backgrounds and their gender backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. And in the interviews, we're hearing them say things like, well, this is the most, female Star Wars there will ever be, and this is the most this Star Wars there'll ever be. That doesn't sound like a story. That sounds like a force-fed diagram. And at the time, I just so happened to be... This was around the time that they started talking about episode 3 of the show in the social media reactions. And they were talking all about these witches that were an entire conclave of all women, and they were redefining what the Force was through their intelligence, and the Jedi were being sort of couched as this out-of-touch, indifferent, almost insidious kind of antiquated hierarchy of power. Obviously, there are a lot of women in the Acolyte that are Jedi, so we can't say for sure that they're drawing an analog to their idea of a patriarchy, but they are drawing a line to an established insurgent philosophy that has supplanted this ancient group of witches that are pre-Jedi in their existence or something. And right around that time that all that chatter was happening, I happened to be watching an anime series that's a true mini-series. It's not one that's like 12 episodes and then it just doesn't end and then you wait. This one's like a mini-series, like The Acolyte. It's 12 episodes. And I started watching it because I kind of like the premise. I like really quirky, edgy comedy premises that are sort of like dark and irreverent, things like that. And in this particular case, there was the added bonus that it was being directed by the guy that directs Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, which is probably my favorite anime. So I said, oh, wow, okay, well, if this guy is handling this, I can't wait to watch this. And the premise sounds great. And that was Akiba Maid War. Now, you might be saying to yourself, okay, Michael, whether you know this show or you don't know this show, just the title alone, you're probably like, how on earth does this relate at all to The Acolyte? Well, obviously, as a story, one-to-one, it doesn't. However, some of its priorities are the same. So, for example, they're talking about at Lucasfilm how The Acolyte is something that's trying to normalize women as strong characters in genre media. Well, Akiba Maid War is about maid cafes in Japan that are having a turf war because all the maid cafes are run by a kind of yakuza. Like there's these two different mafias that run and control all of the maid cafes.
You're embezzling from the group.
Well, it just so happens that in this show, Akiba Maid War, it's pretty much all women. The women are the ones that obviously are the maids in the cafes, the women are the ones that manage the cafes, and the women are the ones that are the leaders of these mafias, these mobs. Now, there are men characters, there are male characters in this show. They're not really all that important. Even the ones with speaking roles, they might be like strong men that, collect the protection money, or they collect the debt. They strong arm people who can't pay the debt. They might be side characters that run some of these satellite, maid cafes or clubs, things like that. They're in the show, but they're not the show. The show is the women. Now you might be saying, well, Michael, this is an anime about maid cafes, so it's got to be like prurient in some way. It's got to have a lot of male gaze, especially given that it's made by two guys, a guy writer and a guy director. No. As a matter of fact, it was the fact that it was directed by the guy that did Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai that made me understand why the show had no male gaze in it whatsoever. The show is not interested in fan service. It's not interested in panty shots. It's not interested in boob jiggle. None of that is in the show. Nothing. It is all about the confidence of the show's purpose and the confidence in the script. The story is about these maid cafes that are having a turf war.
Think you could just hand those out on our turf for your pathetic little store?
I'm very sorry.
Because of the mafias that run them. They go to war with one another.
What's that?
And everything that ensues as relates to that genre. Is it absurd? Yes. Is it a Mel Brooks satire? No. It's more of a Tarantino-like satire. It's more of a very dark comedy. It's a very dark, irreverent comedy, but it takes itself seriously in playing the comedy. In other words, it's not trying to set up a flimsy, half-hearted comedy and then hang a bunch of, scintillating visuals over it to try and trick everybody into watching it.
I need to calm down. At least I'm still alive.
It has the confidence in its story that it doesn't need all that other stuff. And it knows that whether you're a female viewer or a male viewer, you're going to watch that show.
Why are you sitting there naked? I'm devoted.
They're talking all the time in Hollywood these days, and especially at Lucasfilm, about we want stories that focus on women. We want stories about women. Okay, awesome. I'll be the first person to advocate for that. I'll be like, yes, sign me up. Like, show me a great story with women. I don't care that it's all women. As a matter of fact, most of the time when I've loved video game characters or cartoon characters throughout my life, yeah, I like a lot of male characters, but I like a lot of female characters. And not for any like, yeah, show me them women. I don't mean like that. I've never really reacted to things, that way. Oh, sure, I have my attractions like anybody else. I have what I like, but when you have a good story, the good story is not about that. A good story is just a good story. Because clearly, I don't sit down to watch a story full of guys like, let's take the Robert De Niro movie Ronin. All right, let's just pick that one out of the air. Robert De Niro's movie Ronin only has the one token female in it, and everybody else are dudes. I don't need those dudes to be attractive, and very few to none of them are. They're all middle-aged and up, and they're picked for their acting chops and their believability. There's no purpose in that movie, in that story. That story is not out to be eye candy for the audience. It's out to tell a very compelling action yarn. And that's what it does. And it's confident in doing that it doesn't need to do all this other stuff. Similarly, this Akiba Maid War does that with women. Women doing stuff. The women are not, turned into men, symbolically. The women are not treated like objects. The women do not treat the men in the show like objects, as we've seen Marvel do, where Marvel has flipped the paradigm where they're like, well, we're not going to treat women like objects or even hint that we might be, but we're totally going to, rip Chris Hemsworth's shirt off whenever we can while showing women in the movie getting all, hot and bothered by Chris Hemsworth being shirtless. This show doesn't do that either. This show's like, it's about women. There are some men in it. The men are not talked down about. The women don't even concern themselves with discussions about men versus women. You talk about passing the Bechdel test or whatever it's called. Akiba Maid War passes this test with flying colors while being supremely entertaining.
Do any of you know what this cafe is missing?
Steadfast resolve.
A chief capable of running a cafe?
No, swine!
And I think part of the reason it does this, it accomplishes this, is because it wasn't concerning itself with any of that crap when they developed this story. They weren't sitting around developing a story with a cast to make some kind of point. All they were doing was saying, you know what would be funny? You know what would be really entertaining? You know what would be a lot of fun? A maid war mafia. A maid cafe Yakuza situation. That'd be insane. That'd be hilarious. Let's do that. And they just put in the characters that would make the world believable, because you're talking about maid cafes, and then they focused on all of the tension and the rivalries and the insanity and the violence and the offbeat dark humor and all that stuff.
Die in the gutter, filthy pigs! You woolly bitches kidnapped the two of them in the first place!
They didn't try and insert shots for 12-year-olds to get a boner.
It's now our job to do something about Maid Alien.
What do you mean by something?
To put it bluntly, it means we're supposed to go die.
And they didn't turn around and try and make statements about women versus men. I think that's the real difference between a production that Kathleen Kennedy makes, like The Acolyte, and something like Akiba Maid War, is that she only cares about spoon-feeding this message, like holding up a diagram and saying, these are what our characters are about, and they're going to say it to you often. Whereas the other show, Maid War, it's indifferent to all that. Indifferent, I think, is the best word. It's like, I bet you if you brought these issues up to the creators of Akiba Maid War that are being poorly handled in something like The Acolyte, they'd probably look up and go, oh, what's that all about? That wasn't even a thought in our heads when we did this show. We were just doing a show. And this is what it took to do the show. These are the characters we needed. This is how it had to unfurl. There's a philosophy right now with Disney especially where they're trying to draw arrows and things in the movie to point to what their characters are representing and what they're about. The characters are saying it on screen as well. They're doing the prime cinematic mistake, which is they're telling you, they're not showing you. In fact, I think the only show from the Star Wars side of things that didn't make that mistake was Andor. Andor had a lesbian couple in the show, and they treated them like they would treat any other characters in any other traditional pre-Force Awakens genre film, pre-Disney's acquisition of Star Wars genre film. They treated them like they would treat any other characters. And so a lot of people ended up liking Andor. Not because of that one thing, but because the entire production was handled that way. The whole thing was, hey, we're just trying to tell a story in a credible way. These are the characters. These are their situations, their motivations, but we're going to show you what those are. You're going to go along for the ride with us, and you're going to see what their challenges are, what their goals are, what their interpersonal conflicts are. You're not going to have to be told. And I think that's the biggest missed opportunity with something like The Acolyte and many of the Disney Star Wars products, is that they say they want people to be cool with stories in the Star Wars universe about women, and they want people to be cool with stories in the Star Wars universe about people of color. Okay, great. why aren't you just writing Star Wars stories then and casting people that you want to cast that aren't white dudes? I mean, I still think that's not a great way to go about, coming at casting, but if you want to normalize something, if you want the people that you think, which this is where I disagree. They say that, with their preemptive interviews and stuff, they say people that look like me hate their stuff because we don't like women, or we don't like people that aren't white, or we don't like, whatever. And that's not true at all. There are people like that, and they're horrible, but they're not the majority of the Star Wars fan base. You don't get the abysmal score on the Acolyte from the audience by simply being a review bombing group of bigoted haters. That they can't alone achieve that score. The Acolyte has, by all accounts, broken even the hardline ride or die Star Wars fans. And I'm not surprised, because their idea of getting people to enjoy their stories isn't just telling a good story and putting their characters in the story. Which actually is a real shame, because that would have been the fastest way to getting everybody on board. We already didn't have a problem with that stuff. The majority of us did not have a problem with that stuff. We have a problem with bad writing. Really bad writing. You want to get non-hetero characters accepted by the mass audience. You want to get female characters accepted by the mass audience. Put them in a good story like Akiba Maid War. And again, that story's not exploiting women in any way. It's not making them sexual objects. It's not doing anything like that. You might think so if you haven't watched it because of the title Akiba Maid War. Or maybe perceptions you have about anime. And those perceptions are true in certain respects, but not all of them. And in this particular case, it is not true at all. It is a dark comedy, action, satire, with a lot of drama built into it.
Huh?
Oh, hey.
On second thought, I still want to be a maid.
Is it the same tone as what the Acolyte's trying to do? No, they're two different types of entertainments. But both of them center around majority female casts. And yet one of them keeps declaring, we're all in on the female thing, and if you don't like it, you're a bad person. And everybody's saying, but your story sucks. This story's terrible. It wouldn't matter if it was all dudes, I wouldn't like this story. And this other one over here is 98% women. I'm a hetero white guy. I watched that whole show from beginning to end, and there was nothing in that show to watch for prurient interest. Nothing. It was all just flat out witty, sharp jokes, satire.
What's that over there?
Oh, that's our panda Akachimachi.
A what?
Shocking situations involving on a Tarantino level. I don't mean on any sexual level.
My very first day living my dream of being a maid. And I'm ready to leave.
It's a ride. It's just a really, really good, fun, compelling ride that makes you a little uncomfortable at times, but not in the way that these people are uncomfortable. These people get uncomfortable about all kinds of things, and that's why our entertainment industry right now has become vanilla pablum, because nobody's allowed to say or do anything uncomfortable or interesting anymore with their stories, their scripts.
You all look awfully vivacious for a bunch of hogs that haven't paid back any of the honey money that you owe me.
You put female characters in a story like Maid War, like a movie like that, I don't know of many guys that are going to turn around and watch that story and watch that series or that movie or whatever it is. I don't know many guys that are going to walk away from that going, didn't have enough dudes in it. It's about the characters. I know there are some guys out there who don't want to watch women in general. They're out there. They're not many, though. Most guys just want a good story. They're happy to get a good story. And I don't know why they can't plug into that, because you want your gay characters to be accepted. Stop calling them out. Stop putting a target on their forehead in the script. It doesn't mean you're hiding them. It just means you're not trying to like do this clunky business of drawing a diagram to this whole thing. But they don't know how to do a story around any kind of characters. They should have used Andor and maybe got Tony Gilroy to like coach them a little bit. But they failed on that front as well. Because they're over here, you know, with Kathleen Kennedy saying, Leslie, I want you to write a Leslie Headland story now. And it's like, don't do that. You both have terrible instincts. Get somebody else. And stop telling people like Dave Filoni exactly what to do. I know that he looks like a sellout at this point, and maybe he's just trying to keep his job, but I have to believe that on some level, maybe he's one of those people that just acquiesces to the boss. I'm not saying that he doesn't have any accountability for the erosion of his writing quality. He absolutely does. He has a stake in that. But I also believe that if he wasn't working under somebody like Kathleen Kennedy, his writing wouldn't have deteriorated the way it has. Do I think Dave Filoni walks on water? No, I don't. I've never been in the Dave Filoni cult. But I recognize that he has done some decent work in the past. Whereas, I haven't seen Kathleen Kennedy do a good thing yet.
She threw me off the damn building. What the heck, man?
You don't need to start putting people up on screen that look back at the audience and go, neener, neener, neener. Nobody likes that. It's not good writing. Akiba Maid War doesn't have anything like that. None of it. It's just, hey, look at these characters and look at the shit they're in the middle of right now. Oh, damn.
Just pledging your maid futures as collateral.
Pledging our future?
Please, I beg you, I'll do anything you want. Stop! I don't want to go!
And yet, this whole creative group over here doesn't get it. They just draw on poster boards, tape them to yardsticks, and stick them in their movie right in the middle of scenes. And that's why the stories aren't remaining universal, and why the stories aren't resonating with the broadest group of people. And who's getting sacrificed in the doing? New female actors, new female characters, new gay actors, new gay characters. All of these are being sacrificed in an era of completely inept writing that will not survive scrutiny in the years to come. It will be looked back on with embarrassment. It will be looked back on with, oh, it was with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, and all it did was set back representation and everything in movies by another 10 or 15 years. It's been too many generations of gutting real talent for insular corporate zeros taking over those jobs. And here we are. We are here now. I have lost interest in keeping up with Star Wars. I've really lost interest in a lot of that. I want women on camera because it's something that I have always gravitated toward. I really enjoy watching female characters, genuinely watching and enjoying female characters on screen, and not enjoying them in the way, you know, some guys like to be creepy about it. I like enjoying female characters and their stories. I also am tired of us in this minefield. The minefield isn't fun anymore. We need to get back to being able to just tell these stories the way they need to be told. Akiba Maid War, it might sound like some kind of questionable late-night Skinamax show. It is not. At all. Does it use a backdrop that one would think would be lent to something like that? Yes, that's part of the satire. But in the satire, they don't lean into any of those cliches, aside from the maid cafe as a concept itself. But they don't pander. They are not pandering in that show. And it's all the better for it. And I keep wondering, when is Star Wars going to figure out that pandering doesn't work? The only way this is all going to iron itself out is if you start believing in the stories that you're telling and telling them the right way and stop worrying about pandering. They're either going to get there or Star Wars is going to die.
Wait, what? What does that mean? That's it? This place is gonna shut down as easy as that?
We're so fucked.